الله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. A couple of weeks ago when we last had the lesson from Mishkaat we were looking at a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that whoever prays our salah and whoever faces our qibla and whoever eats our dhabaih, whoever eats our halal and lawful food, then such a person is a Muslim and is a believer, and we should not consider him to be a disbeliever or a non-believer. We should not address him to be a munafiq or a hypocrite or anything like that. Now, keeping this particular hadith in mind, some of the brothers requested that if we, in our next lesson, could talk about the issue of takfir, about calling someone a disbeliever, because unfortunately nowadays you have many people just on silly reasons, petty reasons, just because you don't like him, they will call you or you're out of the fold of Islam. Or just say, for example, something happened and they'll call you a disbeliever, non-believer and so on. So we need to obviously understand the severity firstly of doing takfir of another Muslim brother or sister. And also we need to look at and touch on what we call in Urdu the ma'iyar, i.e. the guidelines. You know, what constitutes, say, for example, or when can you say actually that somebody, okay, fair enough, is out of the fold of Islam? You know, when can't you say that? So inshallah we'll be looking at this particular topic for the first part of the lesson, inshallah. Now the first point to remember is that when it comes to takfir, when it comes to calling someone a disbeliever, when it comes to calling someone a non-Muslim, the guidelines in the Sharia is that one has to be very precautious. Ihtiyat. It's not something simple, you know, he's a disbeliever, or you need to do thorough investigation. And after thorough investigation, when you can't interpret his actions or his words in any good or in a pleasing or in a beneficial way, and you've got no other alternative, then you'll have to say, okay, fair enough, he's out of the fold of Islam. It's like, say, for example, if somebody is caught red-handed, just say putting his hand in the till and stealing, and he's done it, say, for example, say at night time, when there's no need for that shopkeeper to be there. Then in that situation, you have to say very bluntly that he's a thief, and you know he's not supposed to be working here because you can't trust him. But just say, for example, if a shopkeeper is taking out some money from the till, say during work hours, then you can't call him a thief because of that, because he may be actually taking out the takings to give it to the boss or to the manager. If he's taking it out, say at night time, 12 o'clock, when the store is closed and he's used the spare key to come and the lights are off, and then he's taking some money, then you have to say, okay, you know, this person is a thief, he's this, he's that. But if he's taking it out during the store time hours or during the open hours, then you could do ta'wil. You could say that, okay, this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to take the money and give it to the boss, and so on and so forth. Exactly the same principle applies when it comes to either considering someone to be a believer or a non-believer. We should try to interpret his actions to the best way, to the pleasing way, to the good way, and it's only when we can't interpret his actions or his words in any other way other than that of the kufr and the disbelief, then you can say that okay, this person is a disbeliever or he's a non-believer. I'll just give you a couple of examples which can be found in a very famous Hanafi jurisprudence book known as Raddul Muhtar. And there's two examples I'll just give, which the author has mentioned, Ibn Abidin al-Shami rahimullah, that just say for example, a scholar or a mufti or just say a qadi, even as a modern day example, just say an imam or a scholar or a mufti was to say to someone, accept the rulings of the Sharia. Accept it. Accept the ruling of the Sharia. Sometimes people come to you, they'll ask questions and you give them the answer, then they're a bit hesitant and say, oh, well, no, I don't want to act upon it. Then you say to him, act upon the ruling of the Sharia. Now that person then responds by saying, I am not going to accept it. La aqbalu, I'm not going to accept it. Now what he just said there, la aqbalu, I'm not going to accept it, would not take him out of the fold of Islam. Because what he said, I am not going to accept it, we can interpret it. Obviously we can interpret it that he could have meant, I'm not going to accept Sharia. Or it can also mean that I'm not going to accept your ruling. Because obviously a scholar or a mufti, his fatwas are not binding. That's why we see the term fatwa shopping. Yeah, they'll go to one mufti for one fatwa, they'll go to another mufti for another fatwa to see if there's some kind of leniency, and they'll take the easy one. So that mufti's opinion is not binding. So when he said la aqbalu, I am not going to accept, it could mean that I'm not going to accept your ruling, your judgment, I'll go to someone else. So that's an example of interpretation. That the word la aqbalu could have meant I'm not going to accept Sharia, which obviously would take him out of the fold of the Sharia. Or la aqbalu could have also meant, oh, I'm not going to accept the ruling or the fatwa of the qazi or the mufti. So therefore, to act on precaution and to give a more favorable interpretation, what we will say is that okay, this person took the second opinion and this person is still within the ambit and the folds of the Sharia. Obviously, if that person quite blatantly said, you know what, I don't act upon Sharia. If he quite blatantly said it like that, then what other interpretation you can give, So in that situation, fair enough, you would probably consider him to be out of the fold of Islam. So that's one example. And another example which the author Allama Ibn Abidin al-Shami rahimullah has given, and this is like more of an everyday scenario, where sometimes you go to brothers probably playing outside in the park and you tell them, oh, Maghrib Salah is about to start, or Asr is about to start, come and pray Salah. Now the brother responds by saying, I am not going to pray. No, la usalli, I'm not going to pray. Now again, la usalli, I am not going to pray. There's two interpretations. Either he means that I'm not going to pray Salah, I don't believe in Salah, I don't believe in namaz. Because that can also, another way of taking a person out of the fold of Islam is that something which is farz in Islam, if you deny that, if you reject that, that also takes you out of the fold of Islam. Take example during Sayyiduna Abu Bakr anhu's time, that there was a group of people who rejected the giving of zakat, the obligation of zakat. So they became what we call murtad, i.e. they became apostates out of the fold of Islam. So similarly, when that person says that I am not going to pray Salah, it could mean that I don't believe in Salah, I'm never ever going to pray Salah, I think Salah is a waste of time. It could mean that meaning as well. But also it could mean La usalli, that I don't want to pray Salah now, but later on I will pray. Like fair enough, 5 o'clock is to say Asr time at 5, so I don't want to pray Asr now, but our friends who are playing football will do our own Jamaat, say at 6 o'clock or an hour later, or 45 minutes later, or we'll do it during, I don't know, half time or something like that. So there's different interpretations. So that will not take him out of the fold of Islam. So what I'm trying to say is that whatever words he says, if there's a possibility of interpretation, then you will go for that favorable interpretation and will not go for the one which kind of it resembles kufr or shirk. And a kind of similar distinction similarity can be seen with the rules of talaq and divorce. So sometimes there are certain words in divorce and talaq which can have this meaning or that meaning. If a husband was to say to his wife, or get out. So the word get out could mean, ukhruji could mean that get out of my marriage and nikah. And if he intended talaq and divorce, then one divorce will occur. But if he, from the word ukhruji meant, or just get out of my face, get out of the room, speak to me later, so on and so forth, then that would not be in the meaning of a talaq or a divorce. So what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that wherever possible, hatta al-imkan, we will try to give a favorable interpretation to what he said. Now you may be thinking, why should we give a favorable interpretation? Somebody may be thinking that, no, why don't we take the first opinion that, no, he meant, I don't want to pray namaz ever. Or he meant, I don't want to accept Sharia rulings ever. Why are we taking favorable interpretations? Now the reason why we're taking the favorable interpretations, because as I was saying at the beginning, takfir is something which is very, very serious. And there are many, many hadiths which talks about the severity of takfir of a Muslim brother or a Muslim sister. Many hadiths of Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawud, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that if you call your Muslim brother a kafir or a disbeliever, then either he is one, because you called him because you think that he is doing something, he is doing, say, shirk or kufr, which amounts you or which is deserving of you to call him a kafir and disbeliever. Or it can mean, the next part of the hadith then goes on to say that if he is not a disbeliever or kafir, then that kufr which you labeled him with will then come back to you. So you will then become a kafir and disbeliever. So what we can understand from here is that it's not some kind of game or a joke, or it's not some kind of things which we can discuss over a cup of tea and some biscuits and so on. No, it's something which is very, very serious. Wherever there is a doubt and so on, it should be wherever there's a doubt, take the precautious opinion. And wherever there is a complaint or there is an accusation that he is this, he is that, then you need to do real thorough tahqiq investigation. And after you've done the real thorough tahqiq and investigation that, okay, he's doing something blatant, that he's got like an idol at home and he's worshipping that, then you can say that he's a disbeliever. Or he's doing something like he's got, I don't know, instead of praying towards the Qibla, he's praying some other direction. Or he's got his own religion, own beliefs, own sets of laws. Then in that situation, then you can say, okay, this person is deviating, he is out of the fold of Islam. But unless, he's doing something blatant, or unless he's doing something which is blatantly kufr or shirk, then it is always best to refrain from doing takfir or calling that person a disbeliever or a non-believer. Even to the extent we look at some of the hadiths of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even if somebody is saying verbally the kalima, and you know that this person is actually doing it or saying the kalima to save his own life, even then you should still treat him as a believer and as a Muslim. And I'm sure you probably read this hadith before, which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari, narrated by the companion Usama bin Zayd radhiyallahu anhu, that if you remember, once Usama bin Zayd radhiyallahu anhu, he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, just say we are in warfare, we are in a battle, and somebody says the kalima, la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and everybody knows that he's saying it just to basically save himself. He doesn't want to die. Sometimes that he's admitting it, or he's saying the kalima, that he doesn't want to get killed. So just say in a battlefield, you're about to, you approach, say, one of the enemies, you're about to pull the trigger, and then he says the kalima, la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So he then asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are we allowed to kill him? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no, you're not to kill him. Even though you know 100% that this person is saying it to save his life, even then you're not allowed to kill him. Why? Because verbally he said, la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So going back to what I was explaining before, that as long as somebody says the kalima, then whatever you think, whatever agendas, hidden agendas, you have in his, you think he has in his heart, is very, very common nowadays to call this person a spy, or he's a munafiq, or he's a hypocrite, or somebody who doesn't turn up for lecture, and then all of a sudden it turns up, oh, he's a hypocrite, he's a munafiq, he's spying, he's got like a recording somewhere in his pocket somewhere, something like that. So that is also wrong as well. Look, unless we got some clear evidence that he is doing something like that, then obviously fair enough, then we could question his Imaan or his judgment. But if we have no strong evidence, then we can't say anything to him. And I'll give you another example to show, like, again, this is also from hadith as well. Like, even some things where apparently it seems as though kufr and shirk, even then, it's always good to give the benefit of the doubt. Now, I'm sure you probably read this hadith before. It can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari. About a person, this actually hadith talks about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Mufti Sahib was explaining. Now, there was a person who was a really, really bad person, a sinner, evil person committing sins, gunas, left, right and center. Now, when he was about to pass away, he gave a will to his sons. I'm sure you've heard this hadith before, where he said to them that when I pass away, don't bury me, because I fear of the punishment of the death. But what you do is that cremate my body, burn my body, and then the ashes scatter it all over, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not be able to resurrect me. Obviously Allah is able to resurrect him. So what happened when he passed away? The ashes were scattered. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala resurrected him, and Allah asked him that, what did you do that for? So he said, because I did guna, sins, and I feared your punishment. So what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave him. Why? Because he had that fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now when you look at the preamble to this hadith, this person was doubting what? What was he doubting? He was doubting Allah's power. He thought that if I scatter my ashes all over, Allah won't be able to resurrect me. He thought that if I'm buried in one place, then Allah is able to resurrect me. But if my ashes are scattered all over the place, Allah will not be able to resurrect me. But obviously Allah is able to resurrect him. So this is an example where someone actually, in a way, was rejecting what? One of Allah's attributes, which is qudra. But what does Allah do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives him and says, yeah, go and enter Jannah and paradise. So what we can understand from here is that, always best to give the benefit of the doubt when it comes to, these kind of things. One final point I want to mention here is, what should we do if we are labeled as a kafir or a disbeliever? Just say somebody calls you a kafir, somebody says that you are out of the fold of Islam, and it's happened with me as well. One of these groups, Dawat-e-Islami you call them, so I think I mentioned it to Maulana Sahib there, but obviously there was this issue, there was a husband, wife, there was some issues between them. So this Dawat-e-Islami, one of the sheikhs or peers, whatever you want to call them, they were like, gonna separate them. So the husband phoned me and he goes like, Mufti Sahib, can you speak to the sheikh, tell him that, you can't just like give a khula or grant a separation of the marriage. So I phoned the sheikh or peer, whatever you want to call him. So first question he asked is that, where are you from? Basically where have you graduated from? And what maslak are you with? So when I gave him the answer, then he started saying, up to a kafir, I don't want to speak to you and so on. So yeah. So we had like a 2-3 minute conversation. So I think probably in that 2-3 minutes, probably called me a kafir probably 15-20 times. But anyway, so the question is that what should you do when if somebody is labeling you that? So there's an incident or story narrated by Nafi' that once a man came to Sayyidina Ibn Umar anhu, and this man complained to Sayyidina Ibn Umar anhu that my neighbor is calling me a kafir or a disbeliever. So Sayyidina Ibn Umar anhu told that person to say to the neighbor that if somebody calls you a kafir or disbeliever, just say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Somebody is calling you that, then say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, then you will be making him lie. You will then make him a kadhib and a liar for calling you a kafir and disbeliever. So that is what we can understand from the practice of the Sahabas, that if somebody is labeled a kafir or disbeliever, then obviously you just say the kalima, then you'll throw him to your face and say, okay, I'm a believer, la ilaha illallah, okay, let's talk now. If he just still keeps on calling you kafir, then obviously the hadiths we read before that, if the kufr thing which he's labeling you with is not found in you, then obviously that will reverberate and hit him, and then he will be considered to be a kafir and a disbeliever. Inshallah, I'll just leave it there for this week because Maghrib Salah time, so may Allah give us tawfiq to act on what's been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.